everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Z Scott, the SEO queen and creator of the quantum SEO method that helps businesses win online, regardless of what Google algorithm is doing. I'm super excited because when we talk about SEO, we're talking about free targeted traffic, and everybody can use more of that. So with that, welcome, Z. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, Brett.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I've talked to a lot of people about SEO over the years. I've known some people that are diehard SEOs, and I know some people that are like, oh, I'm never going to touch that stuff. So I got a lot of stuff I want to dig into, but let's start off with a little bit with your personal story. Can you share your background with us a little bit and give us a sense of that?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California. And when I was 1 year old, my dad had me sitting on his lap when he was graduating from Cal State Dominguez Hills with a degree in computer science. So I grew up with computers all around, the Ataris, Commodores, all of that. My
No
dad
way.
taught
I
me.
know that stuff too. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
I'm definitely dating myself, but my dad pretty
Me
much
too.
taught me everything I know about computers. I remember the floppy disks that were black with the circle and the
Circle?
line with the tape embedded. Yeah, I remember that. Way before USBs, before the floppy disks, and before like CDs, before all of that. So once I got ready to go for college, I had made up in my mind I wanted to go to Harvard when I was in fourth grade. And so when MIT sent me a card, my father told me to take it out the trash and apply. Because I was like, MIT, I was like, no, 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 no. But I ended up applying. I got in, I visited the campus, loved it, loved it, loved it. Even though I got accepted to Yale, I decided to go to MIT. And so I graduated from MIT with 2 degrees, one in information technology and music. And so I worked for a while for a Fortune 500 company as a web applications developer. And I just, I really am passionate about helping small businesses win. And I remember sitting in my cube and I was just like, there has to be more to life than being a cog in a massive machine making rich people richer. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
a little bit
awesome.
about my journey.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, MIT, I think you should pull that one out of the trash and apply. I mean, it's like the most prestigious technical school in the world. So you're not doing
Yeah.
too bad if you're getting in there. So it's funny though. So I mean, you were sort of a techie from a really young age, which is cool because I'll tell you a funny story. I have a brother who's 5 years older, and we had the Atari like video game stuff, but
Hmm.
he actually was the first to get the Atari 400 and the Atari 800. So he was doing programming, and I mean it was like basic programming, and it was like terrible, but so funny because I remember just being exposed to it so young, and I fell in love with it too. And actually, when I graduated college, the first business that I had was I started a business where we were building custom configured PCs and shipping them all over the country. So I love to tinker. I've always loved technology and stuff like that. And obviously, the digital online world is a whole nother universe. It's super, super cool. So, that's awesome. So you already had that sort of technical idea from the start. What made you decide to specifically focus on SEO?
Well, when I was an undergrad at MIT, I built my first website. And my freshman year that fall, I built my very first website. And to me, it was just intuitively obvious that being online is just a game changer. When I thought about the fact that anybody with a web browser can access whatever I put up online from anywhere in the world, to me, that was just like, wow. And so I thought about it as I went through my education and everything. I thought about starting my own business, but I didn't have the motivation to start my own business until like over 10 years later, when I was on food stamps and I was making this business so much money, but I still was struggling. I was making them like over a $500,000 a year, and I was on food stamps and struggling. I think my base salary was like $1,667 a month. That's without commission. And
Wow.
I was doing sales and customer service and support. Oftentimes I would go into the website and make changes if the rest of the team wasn't available. It was just, I was doing so much that I just I quit after I asked for a raise. I just quit. I was like, let me just do this myself, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah, that's amazing. But I'll say, in talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, talking to a lot of people that own business, from my own experience too, one of the things that I would advise my kids nowadays is get a job first, because I think it gives you a perspective that you don't always have if you jump right into entrepreneurship. So the fact that you were working for somebody else first, figured out like how business works, but also realized, okay, the exchange of value here isn't fair. I'm creating far more than I'm being compensated for. And so I just think it sort of gives you a well-rounded perspective, because the challenge for people like me that started right out of the gate, and I ended up with a couple of corporate jobs along the way, some crazy twists and turns in my career, but I never had that perspective. So I didn't know what great looked like either, in terms of how to run a business or how one works in general. And then once I got older, I had a couple of jobs, and I was, working. Then I understood, okay, now if I were to break off on my own, I got ideas
Mhm.
about how I could do this and do it in a way that would be effective. It sort of helps crystallize your thinking a little bit. So I know that SEO for some people seems very mysterious. It seems very confusing. Can you break it down and just help us understand exactly what it is and why it's important?
Well, first of all, SEO seems complicated because people hype it up to be complicated, number one. And number two, there's actually over 200 factors that the algorithm is looking at in order to rank your website. And you really have to have the knowledge and the experience to troubleshoot, to figure out how to get over the hump to get the type of traffic that you want. And so the the thing to do right now, especially with DeepSeek and ChatGPT and Perplexity, you have all these chatbots, which are constantly looking at the internet for content and updating their databases. You want to be seen, and I think the expectation, the mindset needs to be, I need to have as many digital assets as possible pointing back to my website so that I'm a viable brand and seen as a viable brand online. That is the key. And sharing your expertise, those conversations that you have with your clients, those conversations that you have with prospects, those need to be in a blog, in your social media content, in order to consistently rise up in the search results.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I mean, I've always thought of it as sort of a digital footprint, and you want it to be big enough that you've got enough stuff out there. What about what's your take on the sort of balance between creating unique content and just creating content? I know some people say, geez, you just got to get a lot of stuff out there. And maybe it isn't like copied or anything, but maybe it just isn't that great, but you're prolific with it, versus creating less content, but making it really, really high quality. Is there a balance there, or what do you generally recommend?
The key with content online is understanding that the keyword economy is constantly shifting, just like our economic economy is constantly shifting. Believe it or not, there's keywords that no one has content for. Like, I think that's another thing people don't understand about Google. Google will always give you content, but it's not always content that's ideal for the query that you're making, because there may or may not be viable content for that. And so Google will give you what it thinks is the best content. Now, if you know how to identify those keywords that no one has created content for, then you can create your lane online. It's like a blue ocean. You have to follow your blue ocean. You have to find it.
And we're like, so what is your process in terms of, let's say that I wanted to identify what keywords are going to be best for me. Everybody will think of the top few, right? Okay, if I'm a realtor, I already know like real estate, buy house, sell house, but obviously those are going to be super competitive if you're trying to, because everybody's going to be competing for that, and everybody knows because they're the big sort of bucket keywords. Is there a process, or is there a tool, or is there a way that we should sort of go about identifying what we think the right keywords for us to focus on are?
Yeah, I think some tools that you can utilize to identify queries and keywords that people aren't necessarily creating content for, but people are searching for, is you want to use Google's database. Like I think Google Trends, trends.google.com is good. Answer the Public is really good. It gives you a mind map of just real estate and all the questions that people ask around real estate. I have a tool on SEOqueen.com that's really helpful. That tool is on, if you go to SEO Queen and go under tools, and you can find it there. It's a keyword search tool. That one's really helpful. But you really have to think about like the questions that people are asking for and answer those questions. And but you always want to make sure that you're the main keyword, like real estate. If you're a real estate agent and you want any question around real estate for sale or selling my house, you want terms and questions that incorporate those more competitive terms in order to get the visibility, the relevant visibility that you're looking for.
Cool. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So I've heard some people claim that SEO doesn't work. As we said at the onset, I've got people that are on both sides of this fence, and others that swear by it as the most important marketing method. Does SEO always work if we do it right?
Absolutely, it always works. I mean, I'm still getting phrases on Google page one all the time, and I think the misconception with the algorithm changes is that Google's changing the rules. Google is not changing the rules. What Google is doing is just requiring real businesses to step up. There's been a lot of loopholes in the algorithm that have just been closed, but they haven't affected my clients.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember the old days, and again, I'm going to date myself here with the whole internet and SEO, but I had
Uh-huh.
buddies that were the keyword stuffers. They had the white
Uh-huh.
page with repeating the same word 1,000 times. And in the old days, I mean, that actually worked for a hot minute. um, Buying the backlinks from
Hmm.
like link farms and stuff like that. And so, I mean, I remember going through all that, and I knew one guy who ran three of these link farms, and he built his entire business. Every bit of traffic he ever got was from SEO, from these things that he built. And I always
Hmm.
thought, this just sounds so complicated. Jeff, there's no way I'm going to bother with that. I have three different servers. They have to have different sort of root IPs. Otherwise, it's not going to work right. And so he had all this like really confusing thing. But I had another buddy who he had this site that he had created, and he relied totally on SEO. He was always one of the top three listings on the entire thing. He did no other marketing. And I don't know what the guy was doing, so I'm not going to claim one way or the other, but he literally he woke up one day and he would generate sales from his site, and he woke up one day and it was a zero. And he was like, what the heck's going on? And he went and he looked up his own site, and it was dropped from the rankings. And he would like went into a total panic. He must have been doing something black hat, something he wasn't supposed to be doing. He never told
Well,
me that.
there's been I lurk on a lot of the SEO industry blogs. I'm a big lurker, and I have to laugh because there's a lot of guys who are like, "Oh my god, my traffic is disappeared," but they have no social media. Like they're not a brand. Like they're not in the media. They're not doing the digital PR to get the high value backlinks. They don't have an email list. I mean, they just are, they did whatever they could do for the algorithm to get them up there, but they're not. shoring up their traffic and appearing as a brand. And that is the vulnerability to your traffic. And that's why it's really important to build that foundation solidly.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I have to say I really like about SEO is that because it's based on genuine business and authenticity, you could find ways to trick it here and there, but usually those are short lived. And ultimately, the cream is going to rise to the top because if you have a legitimate expertise, if you have a legitimate business, if you have a brand that you're building, somebody might be ahead of you for a little bit, but eventually you're going to get there because you're doing stuff that's real, that's helping people, that's providing a value and a service. And I think,
Right,
at the end of the day, I've always said business is real simple, right? It's an exchange of value. If you want
hmm
money from somebody, you got to give them something that's worth more than that money, or they aren't going to give it to you. And so
right.
it's the same kind of idea, I think.
hmm
So can you give us a sense? What about a time frame? Because another gripe that I hear about SEO is, okay, well, I got to do this, but then I'm going to be doing this for like 2 years before I see any results. I understand that you can't make a firm prediction because it depends on the competitiveness of the market, a lot of other things. But is there some sort of a guideline or some sort of a methodology or thought process we can go through where we invest in it in the right way so we have expectations for how long it will take?
Yeah, I tend to see different results in threes, like 3 weeks, 3 months, and just on like that. Because if you're consistently, optimizing all your pages, adding new content, getting, mentions in the media on a regular basis, it's just going to, and make sure your citations are on point, it's just going to make your visibility grow and grow and grow. And so, sharing your content, your blogs on social media is very important. YouTube is also a big piece, just being able to really focus on vertical search. I think a lot of SEOs don't do that. They just focus on web results. And there's a lot of power to optimizing for images and videos as well, and news results. If you're on Google page one consistently in all those buckets, you'll definitely be able to manage a consistent rise in your traffic.
Yeah, which is, I mean, magical for most people because that's the thing they struggle with the most. I mean, I've talked to a lot of digital entrepreneurs, and everybody's got their own challenge, but traffic generally tends to be one of them. They try their hand at paid ads, usually get their butt kicked with that, and then they come crawling back to other methods because if they don't know what they're doing or they don't have a really high value funnel, they struggle
Mhm.
in that area. So, all right, so let's say that I got a business, I have a website, and I want to use SEO to drive traffic. I'm like, okay, I'm bought into this, and I want to. What is the best way for me to get started?
Well, I think the first thing you really need to understand is your avatar. Who do you help? If you understand the ways that they talk about your products and services and understand what motivates them to buy, then you can start creating the content and identifying the keywords that'll be most effective to drawing those people to you. So it's really important for you to start just understanding who your customer is.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. Is there one of the challenges that I've seen in talking with entrepreneurs is when you ask them, oftentimes their impression of who they think their client is or the way they think their client thinks about them isn't always the same as the reality. Are there any sort of tips that you have with regard to getting to understand your audience or learn about who they are a little bit better than maybe just your own hunch?
Yeah, I think it's important for you to ask existing customers and just your prospects. Just ask questions and make sure you are listening. Just listen, listen, listen. Ask questions. If you're not sure, don't assume. Just ask questions. That is the key. Just ask as many questions as possible.
Yeah, I like the idea of engaging in a dialogue because I've definitely made that mistake myself. And oftentimes, I think we sometimes think that our intuition or our hunch is always going to be the best idea. But in reality, when you really figure it out, you realize, oh, geez, something about that wasn't right. I
hmm
when I was talking about the computer business I had, one of the funny things, talk about a mistake in judgment, we used to advertise in the back of magazines. So this is before, it was pre-internet, but the internet was just coming around at about the time that I shut it down. And so we would advertise in Computer Shopper, PC Magazine, PC World, and all these other magazines. And so we had sort of a bundle deal with the publisher, and the one was really expensive and the other ones were sort of cheaper, and they were put in there. And when our margins started to get chopped down by the big guys, when they realized how to just in time their inventory and get better cost efficiencies, we had to cut costs, because I was like, oh, we're not going to be able to afford to do this. And so my hunch was, the big advertising thing, I'm going to cut that out. That's going to save a ton of money. And I said, before I do this, let me just do one quick thing. For this month, and it's a shame I wasn't doing this the whole time, but for this month, I told my team, every time you pick up the phone to take an order or talk to a customer, ask them where they found us. At the end of the month, I looked at the stats. 95% of the people were from that one thing. All the rest of it was 5%. So even though I didn't save as much, I cut out all the other ads and saved the one big one. Had I done the opposite, it would have kneecapped the entire business. And so that's an extreme example, but obviously you can't go on hunch sometimes. You got to get the facts. You got to get in there in the trenches with your customers, figure out who they are, so you know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and one other thing I have to say is, one thing that'll work for one business may not work for another brand. And so looking at that data is so critical. I absolutely agree with you on that. It's so important.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to fly by the seat of your pants, but it's not a great business strategy. So, are there certain best practices if we zoom out and we look at SEO as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
and other than just getting started in it, are there certain best practices or steps that we should follow when if we're positioning ourselves to try to be proactive with SEO?
Yeah, content is king. I think when I zoom out and I think about what is the biggest thing that moves the needle, is content is king. And the more people that are talking about you, the better. The more people that are talking about your company online, the better. You really want to be on the, the media outlets, the blogs, the podcasts, all the things. They're very important.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the more things there's so much content out there, and there's so much noise that in order to even be seen, even if you have a great message, sometimes it takes a while. I remember I saw Gary V before he was big and famous, when he was sort of still a kid and he was doing his Wine Library TV. I saw him at a conference, and I, it's so funny because he said, I sat there in my basement for 2 years shooting videos that nobody watched. But he got it. Like early on, he was like, if I just keep making content, keep putting stuff out there, engage with my audience. He said, I spend 3 hours a day responding to emails. He individually responded to every email of every person that reached out to him for wine recommendations or whatever else. And the rest is history. He was able to build it, and it's a long road, but if you're doing something you're passionate about, you shouldn't mind that anyway.
Right. I just bought a house, and I ended up moving from California to Michigan to buy my house. And in my house, I have a content creation room. And so I'm really excited about this because it's so important.
That's
Content creation
awesome.
is so important. And I mean, it's so important. I've allocated one room in my house to it.
That's awesome. I'm jealous. Once I get the other kid out of here to college, I'm doing the same thing. um, so there are a lot of different aspects of SEO. Obviously, you just hit on the fact that content probably trumps them all, right? The most important
Right.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get past that, backlinks, keywords, like whatever, what do you think are, if there's sort of a pecking order, what do you think the most important things are? Like on page SEO, is it other things? Are there other factors that we should be thinking about?
Well, the lowest hanging fruit, there's three things that are like the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to SEO. And this will move the needle if you have the right keywords. first thing is make sure that you have Google Analytics installed on your website. The second is make sure you have Search Console um, installed on your website. And the third is make sure you have your metadata optimized for the entire website. If you do those three things, you're going to get organic traffic. And the thing that's so crazy is there's only about 9% of websites get organic search engine traffic. So my clients are a part of the 9%.
Yeah, no doubt. Because look, I've been in digital marketing for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't consider myself an SEO expert. I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough, and I understood intuitively as well the value of content. One of the reasons I started the podcast for two main reasons. One was as an entrepreneur myself and being sort of in my own silo. I was in an industry where we were doing software, but the majority of the people that I deal with were online, and I'd see them once, twice a year at a conference. And I
Right.
realized, this entrepreneurship thing is kind of hard. There's got to be a lot of people that are out there that are trying to do this and they're struggling and they're thinking, am I the only one that feels isolated, lonely, challenged by? And so I said, I got to start a podcast just to let people into the journey and let them
Mm-hmm.
know that we all go through that. No matter how much
Right.
success you've got, there's challenge. It's hard. And
Mm-hmm.
the other reason was I always felt like I had information to share and that I wanted to engage with more people, but I always was so busy doing stuff that I never focused on that. And I was at a conference years ago with this guy that I became really good friends with, and we were chatting over dinner or something like that. And he said to me at one point, he just turned to me and he goes, "Buddy, you got to step into the light." He goes, "You got so many good ideas." And he said, "But nobody knows." Like everybody knew him. He was one of those connector types. He walks
Mm-hmm.
into a room and everybody's like, "Sterling." Everybody knows who he is. Nobody
Right.
really
Right.
knew who I was, and I was like, yeah, that's not probably great for my own brand, my own business. So I'm like, selfishly, I'll do it for that reason too. But
Well, I mean, just like how your mindset was then, like this is the challenge with I think a lot of business owners that I talk to before they become a client. They're not 100% sold on the value of content creation. And creating content is so important just for the exercise of doing that. One, you get out of your own you get out of your comfort zone. Two, you get practice. I mean, once you spend 10,000 hours creating content, you're going to be an expert at it because you're going to figure out what works and what doesn't. I mean, I'm watching my parents. My parents, they have their own YouTube channel. It's called Visible Lady of Faith. And some of their videos, it's like, has like, I saw one, I think had like 15,000, 30,000 views. I was like,
wow,
and I remember being a little skeptical when they first started their YouTube channel. I was like, why are you doing this? Like, you need to spend more time with your grandson. That's what I'm thinking. But they and I'm seeing what they're doing, like the payoff. And I'm also looking at my own YouTube channel, like that motivated me to invest more time into my YouTube channel. And I'm in the process of creating more content right now. It's been a little quiet. My blog's been a little quiet because of the home buying process, but now it's like I'm so excited, like to really hit the ground running with a lot of content because content
yeah,
is
that
king and queen.
that's awesome. And I mean, and it is. Look, it is a slow burn, right? I mean, once in a while somebody will strike gold by putting something up and it just goes crazy, but the reality of it is for most people that's not the case. You've got to have that consistency, and then you start to see the trending, and the algorithms also are smart. They're not going to start promoting your stuff because you make one video. They don't trust you yet. Once you get
Right,
enough stuff out there, and then they're like, oh, okay, this person's posting consistently, it usually gets pretty good results. Let's push this out to other people that don't know about them yet and see how it
right,
goes. And I think it's a really important lesson. If you're doing something you're passionate about, you should want to share it anyway. And if you do it from that place instead of focusing on the end result all the time, I think it's a lot easier to enjoy the process as
right.
opposed to just be refreshing your stats every single day. Oh, I didn't get any clicks on this one. So yeah, totally.
Well, I mean, whether you get a lot of clicks or no clicks, that's data. And you definitely want to do more content that resonates with people, that people are interested in. Once you understand how to implement the insights that you get from your conversations with clients, your prospects, and the data, you're going to be golden.
Yeah, that's perfect. So, in working with businesses, helping them with SEO, what do you see as
Hmm.
the biggest mistakes that people usually make?
I think the biggest mistakes that people make with their SEO is just not putting enough effort into it. They think, or using the wrong keywords. I had one client that came to me. They had been given a keyword research report from another business and another company, and I was shocked and appalled at the fact that this proposal literally would generate them no traffic, no traffic. And so, having a data driven SEO strategy is critical. Like, getting your hands on the numbers so you know how people are searching online, and using that data in an effective way and strategic manner in your business and your digital strategy is a win. It's a win every time. You can't just pull keywords out of the air. That'll never work.
Yeah, I like that. And I also like the fact that, look, we live in an age now because everything is so digital that
Hmm.
the answers to the test are oftentimes visible for us. We don't have to hunt. When you run a direct mail campaign or even my advertising campaigns in a magazine, you put the ad out 6 to 8 weeks before it ever runs. You've
Hmm.
already put out another ad before it ever hits and before you ever get any data or feedback to know whether it's working. In the internet age and digital world, you can get data so much easier. You don't have to scrape it together. You don't have to tabulate stuff. It's all right there. And so if you pay
Right.
attention to it and make decisions based on that, funny story. I was talking to somebody who had a funnel set up, and she said to me, my funnel's not working. I said, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, I'm not making any sales. And I said, well, okay, what does your traffic look like? Well, I don't know. And I said, you don't know how many visitors you've got, but you think the funnel doesn't work? She checked, she has 16 visitors. I'm like, the problem is you can't even evaluate your funnel because you don't have any
Right. That's not
traffic.
enough data.
The funnel might work. It might not. It might not work, but that might not even, the
Yeah.
problem right now is traffic. So let's
Right.
get some more traffic in there and then we'll worry about that. So it is, but it is funny because that was the hunch, right? She sees the symptom. I'm not
Hmm.
making a sale, but she doesn't analyze what it is behind that that's causing the problem. And so I think that's, happens a lot. But so what
Yeah.
about AI? All right. With the explosion of AI, there's all these, it's doom and gloom. It's the best thing ever. It's going to destroy SEO. It's coming back. Like, what do you think its role is going to be regarding SEO?
I think just like any tool, it has to be used with wisdom and strategy. I think those who don't direct it in detail will get burned. But if you direct it in detail and double check its facts, because AI doesn't know everything, you definitely will win. One of the things about me when I'm looking at, the stock market or looking at AI, like I went to school with a lot of people who are creating these things. I, broke bread with these people, went to classes with these people. So I'm not just like, oh, trusting it blindly. I don't trust anything blindly. Absolutely not. So, when I use it, one, I know that AI doesn't have the cultural competency that my clients require, because I mainly work with mission driven, Black owned, women owned businesses. And so, like one of my clients in Tajaka Shange's estate, like I could not rely on AI to capture the cultural impact of
Yeah.
this playwright in creating the content. I had to draw on my own personal experience as not only a SEO consultant, but a fan of Intijaka Shange's work and movies to put together content that was culturally competent and relevant for not only the algorithm but for those who are consuming it. And so that's the key when you're looking at AI. It's being mindful of the fact that you have to bring the cultural competency to it, and uh, the tone, and just direct in detail. So prompt engineering is very important, and I take great care with what I use for my clients. Absolutely. And sometimes I don't even use AI. If I'm a writer. So as much as I am a techie, I am a writer. I'm an author. I wrote SEO training 2017 search engine optimization for small businesses. I also have another memoir that'll be coming out whenever I'm ready to release it. And so, so I love to write, and this is definitely a plus when it comes to SEO strategy, the technical piece plus the writing. That is key. And so AI, you definitely have to be aware of just it inherently lacks cultural competency because of who is creating it. So those are my thoughts on AI.
Yeah, that's a smart way to look at it. Use it in the ways you can use it effectively, but know its weaknesses, know its limitations, and
Hmm.
obviously inject a bit of yourself in there also to make sure that things are authentic and true to who you are. So I think that is excellent advice. All right, so where can people find your products, find your services, connect with you?
Well, you can go on to SEOqueen.com, or you can also email me directly at ZHE@SEOqueen.com. So that's ZHE@SEOQUEEN.com.
Perfect. Thanks for that. All right, I have one last question I have to ask because I always want to know what people are going to say, and that's what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Consistency. Consistency is the number one thing. I have seen so many business owners like hop from one thing to another, and I'm still chugging along as an SEO queen, doing the same thing. How many? Almost 10 years later, and 10 years later, I'll still be doing SEO. Consistency is key.
I love that advice because I think you're spot on. I see so many people that try something, they do 90% of the work, and when it doesn't work, they just jump to something else and start over. And I'm like, but you already did all that work. If you
Right.
just stick with it, optimize it, figure out how to make it work, you're
Hmm.
probably really close. You just
Really
didn't
close.
have all the pieces in right place. Yeah. So it's great advice. I mean, I don't think we always have to be so jumpy about everything that we're doing. Sometimes things take a little bit longer, or they take a little bit more effort to get them done.
Right.
If you did something and your life depended on it, you'd find a way to get it done. But
Right.
for some
Right.
reason, when it comes to business or hobby or whatever, we're like, well, we'll give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll just move on to something else. So great advice. I love that. All right. With that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Z, so much for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit offer.seoqueen.com for a free video case study to learn more about how to get more customers, clients, and revenue without paying for expensive ad campaigns. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.